and welcome back to Monkeynomics. I was actually in the comment section of a YouTuber called Libertarian Views with Scotty M. He's actually a pretty good YouTuber. He knows his stuff when it comes to economics. You can subscribe to him if you want, if you're interested in economics and libertarianism. But anyway, he did a video called, "Why Aren't There More Women Libertarians?" And I just want to kind of read a comment that I left on his video, kind of go over the exchange we had, and then elaborate on what I'm talking about. So in the comment section of the video I wrote, "Libertarians tend to be drawn from independently minded people who value freedom. Freedom holds no value to the dependent because they require others to survive. To them, freedom would be death. Women have depended on men for the whole of human history. Even today, women only have the illusion of financial independence thanks to the welfare state, family court, and diversity quotas in hiring or promotion. At the end of the day, they are either dependent on men directly or indirectly via government. As women are dependent as a group, they value security over freedom and thus are collectivist by nature. The exceptions merely prove the rule. You are now woke." Now, I didn't really know what to expect, but he had a very thoughtful response. He wrote, quote, "Wow, I suppose when you word it like that and having read others' input, this paints a very clear picture. Yes, if women are easily swayed, risk-averse, and seek a provider, it makes sense to what you've just stated. Indeed, libertarians are bred from those who are, more often than not, independent-minded. Which has me thinking that if females who are libertarian became libertarian, was it through their own independent thought, or were they swayed by the influence of another? Indeed, those who are dependent have no thought of freedom. In fact, it's quite a daunting, scary thing. As for the views that financial independence stems from welfare statism, I guess they gather that as a view that as a provider, but there lies the problem. It's not independence, it's forced out of individual hands. I guess this explains why a lot cry out for bigger government, etc. Even one lassie who I thought was strongly capitalist, who ran 3 businesses fighting in support of things relative to state-funded healthcare and education. And this was a woman who was admirably very independent. I tried to once convince her why the NHS is not the answer, paints a very clear picture of the problem," end quote. Okay, so let me elaborate at what's going on behind the scenes. When you're dependent, freedom is death. Really, it's not your freedom you're worried about, it's other people's freedom. If you're dependent on welfare, if you're dependent on socialized medicine to live, it's just common sense. If freedom were granted to everyone, people would no longer pay to keep you alive. They're only keeping you alive because they have to. Because these social safety nets exist for you to sponge off them and get money. So any talk of freedom is a threat to you personally. You're going to be against freedom. Now, you're not necessarily pro your own slavery, but you need them to be enslaved to you so you can live. And this is why when you try to convince someone who's dependent on welfare or government in general to embrace freedom, they think you hate them. They accuse you of hating them, being racist, sexist, misogynistic. This is why. Look at it from the perspective of a woman. Alright, you're a woman. You have the illusion of financial independence because of welfare, the family court, diversity quotas, and hiring and promotion. So you're able to earn your own money and live a relatively independent life, but you're hopelessly dependent on the government. If the government went away, if taxes were slashed, if people were more free, that would mean less welfare for you. If employment opportunity was granted, if diversity quota hiring was abolished, that would mean fewer jobs for you. If the family court was abolished because it's an absolute shit show of horrible misandry, that would mean less money for you. Now, would you be okay? You could be. If you're relatively attractive, you could just find some man to take care of you, but then you'd have to submit to his authority. You are objectively better off being dependent on the government and living a relatively independent lifestyle than having to submit to a man in order for him to financially provide for you directly and having to submit to his authority. In the end, there's no third option where you just become independent. You are hopelessly dependent on either the system or a man. You're either going to submit to an individual man to take care of you, or you're going to submit to the system to take care of you, which is funded collectively by men. There is no third option where you just, become equal to men, earn your own money on your own merit, compete on the free market. That's fantasy. It doesn't exist. For women as a whole, there are exceptions, hashtag not all, but women as a group are dependent on men, individually and collectively. And their dependence means they do not value freedom. Freedom is death. And given the choice between ceding their freedom to an individual man or ceding their freedom to the government, the government is the better choice because it asks less of them. An individual man might demand sex, children, housework, whatever, in exchange for his financial provision. The welfare state asks nothing. It just gives you money for having a vagina. It's objectively the better deal if you're a woman. And any talk of freedom, of reforming this law, of making America more free, of increasing GDP and economic freedom and libertarianism, these are all threats. These are direct threats to their provision. If you free people and they're no longer providing for them through the welfare state, you're threatening them. Now, this doesn't just apply to women, this applies to anyone who's dependent on the government. Freedom is death. The promotion of freedom is a threat to them. And if they're truly dependent and there's no way for them to join the independent class through hard work and whatnot, they're going to fight any attempts to free the producers and the taxpayers from providing for them as a direct threat on their life. And this is why you're a racist, you're a sexist, you're a misogynistic, you're a homophobe, you're an Islamophobe, you're an Istanism and a phobe of everything. This is why. Now here's the paradox. This is the paradox I'm going to leave you with to ponder. As a society becomes more capitalistic, as the standard of living goes up, more people survive, less people starve to death, and so forth. I mean, just look at it this way. In capitalist countries, we have obesity epidemics. In socialist and communist countries, people literally starve to death. So it's, one or the other. But as capitalism spreads and standards of living are raised, people who would normally be weeded out by nature survive. These are the people who become dependent on the government. In the natural order and in nature, these people would simply starve to death. But because capitalism creates all this abundance, they are allowed to survive because the government will take care of them, or churches or charities or something. If these people get political power, they will simply vote themselves more money and they will vote for you to have less freedom. Always, always, always. It's simply a matter of life and death. It's nothing personal, it's just business. If you have a dependent class that's only going to destroy your freedom and take your stuff away because it means life to them, the question is, what do you do? How do you deal with these people? And I'll leave you with that. This is Turd Fling You Monkey. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.